ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today we're taking a look at Victor Vran. Now, this is an isometric hack-and-slash action RPG, but it's also in 3D, so it's not a 2D isometric, it's a 3D isometric. Or is it? Because the store page says it is, but it also sort of isn't, but we'll get onto that in a minute. First things first, options menu. Now, there was music in the menu, and it's sort of disappeared, and I don't know why, but back when I played this in early access, it was extremely buggy, and then after that I kind of forgot about it, so that's why I haven't covered it until now. So, there are a lot of video options, surprisingly, for a game of this type. Now, you wouldn't expect to, it even has a frame rate counter in there if you want that, which is quite nice, and it even supports... There's a lot of gameplay options just right here. Even a colorblind mode, which is very nice to see. It's something that's often forgotten about. And there's different control sets. Mouse move, which is very similar to the sort of Diablo way of playing. I tried this, it didn't seem to really work. And it's partly because of the way the game is played that this sort of control doesn't seem to really suit it all that much. But there is also just the action mode, which is apparently the way it's supposed to be played. It does support a gamepad, but it doesn't allow you to select it unless it detects one at the beginning, so that's why that option isn't showing up. It actually does have one. Now, there are rebindable controls for mouse and keyboard, and the default controls weren't really ideal. I did have to switch a couple of things up, namely, the... control, in fact, it's actually reverted itself. Hang on a second. It seems to have reset itself. So, oh, there we go. Now it's... I don't know why it did that then. Okay, so these are the controls. I switched around rotate camera. This was originally on the right mouse button, and middle mouse was to switch weapons, but because you do want to be able to switch weapons fairly frequently, I've since swapped those around, and it seems to work much better for it. I don't know why that was the default to begin with, but this seems to work much better for me. So, let's get on to the actual game itself and how it plays. Now, I have played, on this particular save slot, I've played almost 2 hours on it, and I've gotten decently far into the story, so I can actually show you what this game sort of plays like. Now, bear in mind, this is first impressions, this is not a full review, so of course I'm not going to be talking about endgame sort of stuff. There is an online mode as well, but I've not actually been able to try that out for myself, so this is just going to be the single player. Right, so this is the main hub area, and this is where you do most of your stuff. This is really reminds me of Diablo 3, which I played quite a bit of recently, and all of the traders are here. There's even a transmutation area here. Trader is just where you flog all the useless stuff that you don't want. And then there's another trader over here who deals with cards. Now, this is an interesting aspect of the game. These cards, which slot into these particular places, give you additional bonuses. And they take up points. You have these destiny points. I'm a level 9 character here. And you gain more points as you level up. Now, the actual bonus for leveling up doesn't always give you points. It sometimes gives you health, gives you different sort of stat bonuses, if you will. And those seem to be linear, because I don't think it's particularly random. At least it shouldn't be random anyway, or that would screw up the pacing entirely. So, you have 2 weapon slots over here, and that's the ones you switch between. They're not dual wielding. They are actually separate weapons, so there's a primary and secondary. And then there is a demon power, and you get a second demon power at level 14. Right, so this outfit here is armor, but at the same time it's a class. I'm playing as the Vigilante, which is a sort of rogue-like kind of character, and deals mainly with crits. So you gain something called Overdrive, which powers your demon powers, and that's something that you gain by getting critical hits. So that will fill up this bar over here. You can see it's 0 out of 4,000 because we're not in combat at the moment. And as we get critical hits, we will fill up this bar, and then we can use a demon power. At the moment I've equipped Shockwave, but we can switch that up with different powers, as we see over here. Some are auras, such as this, which gives you a healing aura. This will give both enemies and allies an increase in damage. I'm not sure exactly when that would be that useful, but then it does give you a bonus to crit chance. So that could be quite useful for this particular character. And there's other things such as this flaming pillar here, and meteors, and this one's armor, and all sorts of things. So there's a lot of demon powers you can use. So we can have a support power such as this, which will slow down projectiles, or we can just go for straight up damage ones. So those are the options we have. And then of course this is also a stash here, who is manned by a player called Private Stash, or rather, I say player, it's actually a non-player character who we unlock throughout the story, and his name is Private Stash. There's a lot of little jokes here and there, which kind of shows that the game doesn't take itself too seriously. Alright, so this is the map where we can access the different dungeons, and this just teleports us there immediately. Those stars that you can see there are related to particular challenges that you can get by simply completing them. So the level of completeness of a particular area, like the Royal Crypt here, I've got one challenge left to complete here, but on the Sepulchre of the Damned, I have 4 left to complete there. So these are what those are for, and this is our current objective, the hunting grounds over here. But what I'm going to do is just quickly show you, I believe we can go here, and you can see these are the challenges over here, just to give you an idea of what the combat is like without going straight into the story. So loading times are fairly short, and the game is played from this perspective, but you can rotate the camera. Now, the reason I said this isn't entirely isometric, at least it doesn't seem to be, it is a top-down perspective, but isn't really true isometric, because if I hold down W and move the camera, we can actually control our character that way. So it is actually a third-person game with a very high perspective, if you will. So, of course, I'm sure people will correct me on that. I don't know if it's entirely isometric or not, but that is a thing we can do. So, and you will need to do that because you need to find certain areas of the map. You have a jump ability, and certain areas of the map you can actually jump up on. And there's even a wall jumping ability such as that, which, now the thing about it, will actually let us go up there, maybe? No? Right. So there are some jumping puzzle elements in there as well. And there are secret areas of the map which can be reached just by jumping. Alright, so I'm going to attack this ghost over here. And you can see the Diablo influence. In fact, there are 2 games that this seems to be very heavily influenced, is Diablo and the Van Helsing series. Of course, your character seems to be very heavily based on Van Helsing and that universe, with all the, I suppose, vampiric references in the story as well. But at the same time, the similarities with Diablo 3 would be quite obvious to anyone who's actually even so much as seen the game. Right, so right now I'm using a shotgun, which is one of the ranged weapons that you can get. And there's actually a fairly decent weapon variety. In fact, there's a lot of weapons available at the beginning, and some look very similar but play very differently. So right now I have a rapier, which is a very long pointy sword for pointing and sticking people with. And in fact, this is actually one of the challenges, is to go and destroy these things. So they all have different abilities. So the shotgun, of course, is a ranged one, and we have a point blank shot, which is a very short range but very wide area attack, or we have the aimed shot, which we can do that like that. Now, in the default controls, the mouse is actually what is used to aim. So if we highlight a character, we'll shoot at that, and that's how it's actually aimed. If you use mouse move, then it, well, is pretty much the same as Diablo. You click on an enemy to attack, and it'll move, your character will move there to attack. But I find that's probably not ideal because you do need to move around quite a lot. As you saw just then, there was an area of effect attack that was cast by that champion over there. So there are some enemies that do cast certain attacks which will cause you to have to do different things. There is a lot of enemy variety, even at just this very early stage. You can see there's these pyromancers and the skeletons earlier, and in fact, the starting area it's mainly spiders, but even then there's at least 3 different types of spiders. And then there are the champion versions of that which have special abilities, and then there are bosses, and there are a lot of different enemy types right at the beginning, and it just becomes even more varied as you go along. Now, it feels a little bit cheap using this weapon, partly because I'm a little bit over-leveled for this area, I think. But at the same time, this is a weapon that I got out of a gift box, and that's not a pay-to-win thing, because there's no microtransactions. That's actually something that you can get as a reward for leveling up. So I'm not sure how close we are. We're not that close to leveling up, but basically you have a choice of 3 different items. It can be 2 cards and a gift box, 3 different weapons to choose from, and so on and so forth, or even just these potions. You can get a bunch of those for leveling up, and you only get to choose one of 3. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky because of what you choose to pick. Now, I chose to pick a gift box, and that gift box gave me this shotgun. This shotgun might not be that useful at later levels, but at this stage, with a 14% damage increase, we're already hitting between 34 and 68, and we gain health on hit. And considering that this character can move around quite quickly with the dodge ability, you can actually just dodge out of the way of most attacks. And the fact that it's ranged, as you're going to see here, is quite useful. We can actually shoot from pretty far away. I want to avoid that attack because, in fact, let's actually shoot him with that. So you might have noticed some of the enemies get marked with a little green, oh, rather, red circle. And just waiting for that to fade away. And that's actually one of the abilities of this particular class. When he hits targets, he can mark them, and they become vulnerable to Victor's attacks as you continue attacking. So basically, what that does is I believe it makes them weaker to attack, so it's probably reducing their armor in some form. And at the same time, of course, with very high crit chance, you're basically untouchable. Which is useful for this dungeon because I'm supposed to complete a challenge where I take no damage. Not my first choice for a challenge, I would say, but not much we can really do about that. Alright, so the pyromancers are an interesting character. They cast very slow moving, but seeking projectiles, which are quite annoying. And you might have noticed as well, just then, the skeleton type characters have a chance of resurrecting when you kill them, which can be quite annoying if you are playing a melee type character. So as much as I would like to clear this challenge, we're going to switch over to the rapier and show you how that plays. So let's just clear some of these urns, because they do sometimes contain gold and all that. Alright, let's rotate the camera a little bit, because as we go into this area, it's a little bit of a long room. Alright, so let's mark you, and that gives a bleeding damage to that enemy type. And let's charge through. So the rapier is mainly about critical, and it's a very fast attacking weapon with a very decent range. In fact, it has a longer range than most melee weapons. So you can actually avoid most hits if you keep moving. Now, I just took damage there. But one thing about this particular weapon is that bleeding damage, the coup de grace skill. If it manages to successfully kill an enemy, you can then cast the rapier charge, which is this move. So it then becomes a case of doing that and then doing that constantly, which means that you can constantly use those abilities and you basically never have to use your basic attack, which is kind of an interesting thing. So long as you can maintain your distance, you got a pretty good chance of clearing rooms very, very quickly. Now, of course, all of those are skill shot. They are actually based on the point at which that you're aiming at with your mouse. So if I go aim there, that's where it'll go. Of course, it has a limited range, but it will continue going in that direction. So let's see if hopefully I can kill this one. There we go, and that reset the charge, and then I can go and do that again. So let's just try and bring them around into a nice, neat little line, and do that, and then again. And you can just keep doing that again and again, which makes the... I'm quite enjoying playing with this particular weapon, if that's not immediately obvious. And of course it does give you a little bit of leeway, because you don't have to aim directly at them, it has a slight area to it. So that's some of the different weapon types. We also have scythes, which are completely different. They have a very, very wide difference in their damage. If you look at that, it goes 10 to 69, which is quite high, but also very, very low. So that's a little bit strange, that wide damage gap. But it has very high... Well, this particular one has very high armor piercing. So that 10 damage might not be too big of a problem. But at the same time, the way the scythe plays is kind of interesting. It's a very wide area attack. And let's see if we can find some enemies to test this out on. So our first ability. Come on, skeletons. Come on. Yes, all come to me. There we go. No, you missed. Alright, that missed completely. But that gives a brief moment of stun, and then we can do that, which is quite nice. Now, your basic attacks grant you soul shards, which you can see right here, and each one of those empower your next special attack. So the way that you do it is you do basic attacks, and then you can use one of these. So this, the more soul shards you have, the longer the stun effect lasts, and for this one, the more soul shards you have, the longer duration of the whirlwind, which is kind of nice. The longer you... Yeah, the longer whirlwind is better. That's all that really needs to be said about that. Longer whirlwind is better. So this makes it a very effective sort of room clearing weapon. Now there's some spider eggs over there, so we can just jump over here. Especially when you're fighting a lot of low-level stuff, having that sort of room-clearing weapon. I'll just rotate the camera so we can actually get a look at them. Yes, having a very nice room-clearing weapon is very useful against these sort of low-health type enemies. In fact, let's just do that. You can see a much longer whirlwind there. Stun all of them, get some free shards, and well, we still wait for the whirlwind to cool down, so we're not going to do anything with that. But let's just switch weapons. So that's another thing we can do, is just on the fly switch weapons. So if you're waiting for the cooldowns on one of your weapons, you can just switch, which is a very, very nice feature. I like this because it reminds me a lot of the gameplay of Diablo without so much of the I guess, tedium that I found with it. Now, a lot of the big Diablo fans will disagree with me on that, and that's just a matter of preference, but I didn't find Diablo too enjoyable for very long, simply because I just thought that the combat didn't have the sort of dynamic I was looking for. This feels a little bit more engaging in terms of the hack-and-slash nature of it, so that's what I like about this. Now, it will be interesting to see what the actual multiplayer component, or the online component of this entails, but this single player, in fact the story mode itself, is enjoyable enough. There is a lot of polish in this game. Now, most of the dialogue has text, but it's not just read-only text, there is actual voice acting, and the voice acting is of varying caliber. For example, the main character, Victor, is voiced by the same guy that did Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher 3, and he's doing pretty much the same voice. So I don't know if that's a sort of tongue-in-cheek thing that they've done there by making Geralt the sort of the main character, while simultaneously making him look like, well, the main character from Red Dead Redemption. Especially in this particular outfit. So that's just an interesting point to note. There's a narrator as well who plays the role of a character who at the moment is just called The Voice. And he's got a lot of very interesting dialogue as well. So let's just jump into the Royal Crypt here. And his dialogue is kind of tongue-in-cheek, a little bit of breaking the fourth wall as well. And it's generally quite entertaining. In fact, in this particular part of the game, at a certain point he starts narrating as though Victor is Stanley from the Stanley Parable. And just to kind of rub the joke in a little bit more, he accidentally refers to Victor as Stanley at one point. So that is quite a nice little nod to things, to other games here. But there's also all sorts of like internet memes. There's an arrow to the knee joke. There's plenty more. See, there's even a keep calm and carry on. The game is full of references such as that. So if you're a person who enjoys the kind of humor that you find on certain parts of the internet, then that is something that's going to be right up your alley. But overall, the voice acting quality is actually very, very good, and can't really complain with that. Especially when it comes from the main characters. So there's a lot of polish in this game, and I'm really enjoying just this sort of gameplay style of everything. So let's just clear the room a little bit. And give him a bit of a stun. And then point blank. You can see, you can really synergize just the two weapons together to create a particular build that appeals to you, which is very nice indeed. In fact, that alone, just the interaction between the two weapons, just the way that that works and the way that you can form different builds based on that, is quite nice, actually. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Panzer taking a look at Victor Vran. It's now available on Steam for $20 or your regional equivalent currency. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.